By now we were close enough to the front to hear the rumbling of the big guns. So when you got back after the hospital, the war was still very active,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Very active.
yeah.
Was it just as much active when you got back as when you left?
Oh, yeah. Well, the war hadn't ended.
But you had a lot more American soldiers there now, right?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot more
More
equipment.
divisions. They had 3 more divisions added.
And then apparently when you got back, the Americans were in a dominant force. They were taking over the Germans at this time.
Yeah, yeah, but the Germans were losing all their equipment.
They lost
bombed
everything,
out.
yeah.
And you had warm clothes this time.
And you had warm clothes this time, right?
And you had warmer clothes to wear. You had warm clothes, a coat.
The second
No, we
time,
never issued that till almost spring.
okay.
Boots, we never got the boots.
Never got the boots.
Got those boots with the buckles on them. The kids
Galoshes,
wore.
yeah.
By
I
now,
got stupid transport on this damn foot.
by now we continue the next morning by 6x6s. By now we're close enough to front to hear the rumbling of the big guns. What's the big gun?
Yeah.
What's it?
105, 155.
Did you ever operate them?
No, that's artillery.
Artillery only, right? Artillery.
Yeah.
The only feeling of fear in my pit of my stomach gradually returned. The old feeling of fear in my pit of my stomach gradually returned. I wondered as my fears returned if I would be as lucky this time around. I was thankful for the confusion and anxiety it created, as it would take my mind away from thinking about Renee. I told myself repeatedly that I have to snap out of it before I return to my unit or face a great risk of getting myself killed or seriously wounded. Trucks from the division met us at the final move on a return to duty. The snow had stopped and the weather had turned almost spring-like. The snow and ice was melting, giving us a huge areas of thick, oozing mud. So now you got a lot of mud.
Yeah,
That must have been a real mess.
yeah.
Did a lot of 6x6s get stuck in the mud?
No, they were 4-wheel.
They had no trouble.
Well, they didn't put chains on.
The division had been in a rest area from 12 February to 15 February at a village called Loonville. On 20 February, they went into a defensive position at Panagen, Holland, under the command of the 8 Corps of the British Second Army. They had been positioned there for about a week when I rejoined them. The truck that brought us to the area where my company was located contained 2 other soldiers besides me. One went to the anti-tank company located east of our position, and the other soldier went to the G company, which was in our sector. Both had been hospitalized for trench foot and were gone for a relatively short period, several weeks at the most. It was almost dark when I pulled up to the CP, which was located in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. I felt awkward and a bit apprehensive at what I'd find on my return. As I entered the CP, I felt like a new replacement with all my newly issued clothing and gear. The first to greet me was T5 Eckerd, the company clerk. Did you get along with T5 Eckerd?
Yeah.
He was all right?
He was a little snot.
What was his rank?
Corporal. Technician.
What was his job?
Kept tax records, death records, insurance and all that. He worked in the office.
Was he much older than you?
Huh?
Was he much older than you?
No, he's probably 2 years older.
What happened to Eckerd?
Huh?
What happened to him? How did he end up?
I think he stayed with them, and then when they moved out, he went back. I guess he got transferred out.
So you think he made it through the war?
Yeah.
Okay, the first to greet me was T5 Eckerd, the company clerk. Why would he be a company clerk and not sent to the front line like everybody else?
Well, someone had to do the bookwork back behind the lines, who got killed, what happened, this, insurance, and all this other nonsense.
Well,
He was with headquarters.
well, T5 Eckert said, "Well, Jack," he greeted me, sneering his words and peering at me obstructively. We've been expecting you for several days, so how are you doing?" Suddenly I felt like I was back in Breckenridge, picking up the weekend pass and enduring the derisive remarks of T5 Eckert. "I bet you had a great time in Paris," he derided me. "It was all right," I said, waiting for his next obtuse remark. "Too bad it didn't last longer," he smirked. "Where's my platoon?" I queried, challenging the subject and wishing to depart his company as quickly as possible. So you didn't like to be around him?
Yeah,
Was he just basically a smart ass?
yeah. He was.
Smart ass.
Yeah.
He became serious and in a polite military fashion, informing that my company commandant wanted to see me. I thought this was a new twist. We had not had a CO for most of the time we were over here. He ushered me into an adjoining room where a radio was blaring out. Upon seeing Lieutenant, a first class lieutenant, immediately he turned it off and introduced himself. He had been with the company only a short while have been transferred from combat engineering outfit. My first reaction to this bit of information he relayed to me was that he had screwed up in some way and they dumped him into this line outfit. So you thought they possibly dumped him from his other job and they brought him here. Was he a nice guy?
Well, as they went,
He went to say that we had no first sergeant, yet they were also short platoon leaders. He filled me in on the status of the company, and I was forming a mental impression of him. He was young, probably a year or two older than I, and he seemed like a pretty reasonable person. What impressed me the most, though, we did not have that air about him as Captain Dreward had. I was assigned to my old squad and would have added responsibility of taking over the platoon at times. Since we were greatly under strength, the priority had shifted to the Pacific as far more manpower was concerned. He related they did not expect the new replacements in the near future. He also mentioned he would attempt to get me a couple more stripes, but added quickly not to count on it too much. I knew how that went, but was not too concerned about it. Why were they moving most men to the Pacific?
huh? Because the war was ending in Europe, they shipped over to the Pacific.
Was it possible you could have got
I
shot?
was sweating it out, yeah.
It would have been possible.
Yeah, because there's nothing else to do there in Europe.
How would they transport all these soldiers from a whole other part of the world to the Pacific? How would they transfer them? What form?
Well, I imagine they had planes then, they put on the cargo planes and shipped them over.
That must have been a long ride.
Yeah. And then trucks and everything else, convoys going out.
So you did not want to go to the Pacific.
No, I don't want to go to the Pacific.
Do you know many people that were sent to the Pacific?
No.
As we sat there, he offered me a cup of coffee and a piece of fruitcake he had gotten home from Christmas. So he got some fruitcake home from Christmas.
No, see, that movie they had the Germans were being occupied, and that one German officer said to the other officer, he said, "See, fellas, they're fighting the war over here, and they can bring stuff over here on like fruitcake." He said they have all unlimited equipment.
Yeah, okay, I remember that, yeah. Did you like the fruitcake?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was still fresh. I consider went overseas.
Yeah. He got home from Christmas. He said that most, if not all, of the old company were gone for one reason or the other, and I would understand. He said something about the fortunes of war. We must be steadfast in our resolve to see this conflict through to its final victory. He closed by saying that he was confident we could work together, and I knew I'd do a good job for him. I thought as I munched on a fruitcake that this was all a bunch of bull, and I probably would not see him again. Things had not changed all that much. So, did you ever see him again, or did he
No,
disappear?
no.
So it was just a bunch of bull.
Him,
Yeah, he just took off.
yeah.
A Jeep was waiting outside for me. To utter surprise and joy was Post behind the wheel. So Post is still around.
That Post was the driver.
Man. Post said, "Jocko," he shouted with a huge smile in his oversized face. I embraced him and said how glad I was to see him again. What do you mean by his oversized face? Was it swollen?
He had a big fat face
Big fat face?
Yeah.
Okay.
and wore glasses.
Okay. Were they big glasses or small?
Glasses?
Yeah.
GI glasses.
What's GI glasses look like?
Bigger,
Bigger. So that made his face look fatter.
yeah.
I was a joy and pleasant surprise to see Post once again. His familiar thick-rimmed glasses were always needing cleaning, and his dusty, pale facial pallor, which suggested he has not washed in several days, were a delight and a reassuring sight to see him once again. That guy got around. Post got everywhere.
Yeah.
And he never got wounded, you don't think?
Well, he was behind the lines all the time.
As we drove the darkened road, I asked him a million questions, and he tried to answer them with his usual candor and wit. We talked about Leip for several minutes, and I could see that he'd still not got over his death. I told him how bad I felt and blamed myself indirectly for the not doing the right thing by him. Post quickly chimed in, "That is nonsense. My blaming myself. I did everything for Leip, and for Leip, and only one person could be possibly do under the circumstances." He then told me that Larson was transferred to the regiment. His uncle, who was stationed at the regiment, got him some kind of deal there. He also stated that he was moved there right after I was wounded, and that he had also picked up another stripe. Do you remember who Larson was?
Larson was in our company.
And he picked up another stripe,
He was PFC, come up to corporal.
and he got transferred out of the regiment. Where did he get transferred to?
Probably other end of the top, other end of the division.
He said his uncle was stationed at the
Yeah, his
regiment.
uncle was there. His uncle was in headquarters.
Okay,
Yeah, so he got all the inside information.
okay. Did you ever see Larson again?
I saw it at one reunion a couple of years later, but that was it.
I muttered something to the effect that Larson was somewhat of a politician in his usually witty remarks. Post agreed, and I was declared that I would stay at our present ranks until we got out of the army. He only laughed and slapped me on the shoulder good naturally. We reached a small farmhouse where the squad was billeted, and as we entered the dimly lighted room, I saw the faces of the people who were entrust their very lives to my experience and knowledge. I felt an awesome sense of responsibility for them, and I was determined I would not let them down. They were all replacements from the replacement depot. So you never got your stripes. What stripes should you have gotten?
Probably a sergeant, staff sergeant.
What stripes did you start with?
I started with a PFC,
And what stripes did you leave with?
with a corporal.
So you actually were raised to a corporal from PFC.
Yeah,
When did that take place? What part of your...
about a year later.
And then everyone that was in your division, heads, told you you'd probably be sergeant. But what happened? All these people got killed or disappeared or...
Well, their ranks are open.
I see. Did you inquire after the war to try to get your extra stripes?
No, that'd be helpless.
So you didn't do nothing? They wouldn't have listened to you after the
No,
war.
no. You got what you got, and that's it.
They were all fresh out of the replacement depot, frightened a little way ahead, but determined to do the best of their ability. I greeted each one of them, shook their hands, and formed a mental image of each one as I talked to them. I liked what I saw, and for the first time I perceived what I believed was the nucleus of the top-notch fighting group. I felt comfortable with them, and I only hoped that they would be left alone and developed and looked after one another. We were positioned on the west bank of the Maas River, and the battalion was pulling patrol duties on the river. It was on a rotating basis, and as luck would have it, it was our turn in the barrel. I was informed from our patrol mission within several hours before we were actually to jump off. I was to be a 5-man reconnaissance patrol the river for intelligence and search the area for troop strength and position. I picked 4 men at random to accompany me on the patrol: Eisler, Tuttle, Calhoun, and Shepard. Calhoun was assistant gunner in the squad, and the rest were ammo bearers. I purposely picked Calhoun because he looked street smart and he could take care of himself. Luckily, none of the replacements were ASTP or Air Corps. We were to cross the LP line of departure at 2200 hours, and in a short time I had left, I checked the men for identifications and personal belongings. They all left behind in the event that we were captured. They also were told that in the event we were captured, they would give them only our name, rank, and serial number. I did not expect to see action this soon, and worse yet, a night patrol with green troops. I suspect I was most likely candidate, having been gold bricking for the past month or so. I also briefed them on the noise control to walk slowly and quietly, planting one foot down, listening, then raising the other. Low branches were moved by your feet, hand, and passed to the next man, which eliminated the chance of a branch flying back and snapping someone and making noise. If you had to cough or sneeze, put your mouth in the crook of your arm. It suppressed the noise. I also told them to keep their eyes on me for my signals, hand signals, and instructions. I also stated that if they had to fire their weapon, it was best to fire low, as anyone out there would be hugging the ground. Firing high would just cut the trees and give away your position.
What kind of hand signals would you do, John?
Could you show us the hand signals?
Yeah, you said you'd give the guys some signals. What kind of signals?
Hand, go this way, hold down, up, go down, all that. You couldn't talk, you couldn't shout.
So you're giving a lot of hand signals. At the appointed time, we approached, assembled at the CP, and waited for our further instructions. The lieutenant made a short appearance and told us once again was our information and raised his arm. Take care and see you soon. And he disappeared inside. Not actually an inspiring send-off, I thought, but nevertheless this was it. We were on our own, and we started out past our outpost and picked up a password for the night for the last century. I replied to him that we would be returning in several hours, about 200 hours or sooner, and he waved us on. You want one of those
What?
candies?
What? Those what?
Candies.
Oh, Dave, I can't eat all that stuff, come on.
We crossed sparsely the wooded area that led to the bank of the river.
What was winter or summer then?
We crossed sparsely wooded area that led to the bank of the river. It had gotten colder that night, and I wore on the slippery, oozing mud, had stiffened somewhat, which made walking easier. We could hear the swishing of the swift current in the river and crouched down at the bank while took a compass reading to aid what I was finding way back. I turned back toward the town and a shot reading at the most prominent feature I could find, the tall aspiring church steeple. We looked at the rubber shaft and found it hidden among some brush in the trees. Luckily, it was a moonless night and fairly cloudy, which would hide most of our movement. Before we set the raft in the water, I whispered to everyone to listen intently for any sound or movement on the other side. After several minutes, we quickly put the raft in the water and everyone climbed into it. I was surprised that the men were as quiet as they were. The current was fairly swift and we started to drift in a southerly direction, trying all the while to steer the raft with our oars directly across the river. If there were any Germans awaiting for us on the opposite bank, this was the time they would open up and fire on us as we reached midstream. We were lucky and we reached the bank without incident. We quickly got ashore, concealed the raft, noting its position near a large tree. We started out casually, staying in the shadows of the trees. We would talk a short distance and then stop, crouch down and listen for a minute, then continue walking. We covered some distances in a fashion, moving west all the time and not running into any Germans. The woods were thick with underbrush, and I cautioned the men to be careful where they stepped, as a crackling of dry twig would carry a long way. We moved inland, walking and stopping. We covered approximately 3 miles or more. Our instructions were a 2-mile insertion, and I believe we covered more than that. I looked at my watch. It was 01:15 hours. It was time to turn back. As we crouched down from the bank before returning, everyone heard a twig snap to our left. Immediately everyone was flat on their stomachs, hugging the ground with their weapons at the ready. When we heard the voices, rather loud voices, as they came closer, and we saw that it was a squad of German soldiers passing us in a northerly direction. As they passed, I motioned to the men to stay put in case there were more of them behind. After a short while, I whispered to Calhoun that I was going to follow them to find out where they were heading. I also relayed to him that if I was not back in 10 minutes, to head back to the raft. I followed the German squad for a short distance until they came to a small log hut with a radio antenna on one side. It was a listening post used by the Germans to pick up our radio transmission and relay them to the intelligence people. I waited several minutes to see if there would be any returning the way they come. As I waited, I recorded the coordinates on a map I was carrying and, satisfied that there were no one coming, hurried back to join the men. I reached them and I motioned them forward.
How did you know your coordinates? How would you? Oh, a map.
Map.
Okay.
Oh, you good at reading a map?
Yeah. Don't put it out.
I motioned them forward as we moved back to where we had hidden the raft. We found the raft, crossed the river, keeping the church steeple in sight and going by compass readings. We concealed the raft, reached our first outpost at 2:18 hours, gave the password once again, and passed through our lines. I reported to CP and Eckerd, woke up the lieutenant for me to give him my report. He listened, half asleep, and stated he would get the information back to headquarters. With that, he dismissed me and crawled back into his sleeping bag. I thanked the men and told them that they did well out there. We had a little critique on the night's events, each contributing his own personal reactions to the first combat experience. They gave us a chance to get to know one another, and it was helpful in our future relationship. Once again, I thanked them and I suggested that they get some sleep. They all waved, and I could see there an air of relief in their faces as they departed for their billets. We would not have to go out again for some time, provided we stayed here. I was also relieved we did not run into anything and that we all got back safely. As I reached the cottage where we were billeted, I did not even know where I was bunking. I found a spot on the floor next to a dresser, took off my boots, wrapped the blanket around me, and I wanted to brush my teeth, but not even knew where there was any water. As I lay there too rot up to sleep, I thought of Renee, wondering what she'd be doing and waiting to be with her. I recalled all that we had done together, and how she looked, and many conversations we had. I pictured the parlor again. Feeling came over me. I saw Renee sitting there before the fireplace, angelic face reflected in the firelight, tormented by the indisputable force that would overcome and conquer both of us. I thought of the hospital that I've just left, all the nurses and doctors and orderlies, all their jobs to do, and this was mine. It seemed unfair in a way, but this was the story of my life, and nothing had changed. Anne had also appeared last night and came to mind. Hello. Hello. Anne had also appeared last night together and became to mind. Then I pictured Jean in her red dress she wore the night of the dance. Shortly thereafter, I was sound asleep, and I was back home doing my job. The next day, we were ordered to move out to the area of Venlo, Holland, to relieve Unit's 16th Corps along the Rhine River. I rode post in a Jeep, and it gave us a chance to get reacquainted. We talked about our time at Breckenridge and later at Haverford West. We also talked about Lape, and then that he mentioned that he had written, and it was then that he mentioned that he had written late parents. I told him that was a great gesture on his part, and I should have thought of doing the same. As we bumped along the muddy road, I suddenly asked Post what he was going to do after the services. Without hesitating, he declared he had returned to school, get his law degree, and join his parents' law firm. I felt envious and resentful as he spoke lovingly about his parents and their concerns over his welfare. He could not wait to get back to resume the relationship that he had terminated so abruptly by the war. I avoided saying anything about my future plans, as I did not have any, nor did I contemplate any. We reached Venlo and were building a farmhouse on the outskirts of town. I was hoping that we would get a short break to give me some time and get acquainted with the squad. We were positioned
Can I wrap it up? I only got a minute.
We were positioned in a sector opposite Wesel and the North Duisburg on the south, located on the west bank of the Rhine.
Wow.
What?
So, was it still really cold there? Was it still winter when you were there?
Yeah, it's cold there. Snow, cold, and everything.
What happened to that, those Germans that had the, that you gave the coordinates to?
Artillery got them.
Oh,
They shot artillery shells over the coordinates. So you guys are leaving, huh?
We're just putting this down. We're not leaving. Is another recording?
yeah. Okay.